Watch this. One of these three backhand loops is using the technique everyone teaches, and it's the one that looks the worst. I'm Xiao Han. Today I'm breaking down why the popular advice to hit behind the ball actually hurts your backhand loop. Next, that first loop, the one that looked awkward, that's actually the most popular technique right now. You get behind the ball and just punch through it. A lot of my students ask me whether that style works. Here's the problem. For amateur players who don't already have great friction on the ball, this method is extremely unreliable. Sure, at the professional level, that punch-through style produces absolute power. But if you can't generate consistent spin, you have no safety margin. As an amateur, you don't have that raw power or that blazing hand speed. So ask yourself honestly, are you better at brushing the ball or hitting through it? 90% of you would say hitting. And that's the problem, because generating real spin is genuinely difficult. Now watch, this ball has real quality. All I did was add acceleration. Forearm goes down first, then forward, then out to the side. Always forward before sideways. A lot of recreational players get the very first forearm movement wrong, they push straight out. Watch! That pushing habit comes from how backhand drive is taught. You learn to push forward, so you carry that pattern into your loop. Instead, here's the correct sequence. First, the elbow stays firm, and the forearm drops below the ball. That low starting position is what lets you create friction against the underside of the ball. Second, you drive forward into the ball, and only after that forward push do you whip the racket out to the side. That sideways snap is what adds real quality. You can't just lift the ball up and hope. So why do your backhand loops keep going long? Think about it. A properly executed loop shouldn't fly off the end. There are exactly 3 reasons your backhand goes long. Number 1, you have no friction on the ball at all. You're just lifting with your arm. The moment you try to add power, you heave upward and the ball sails out. Number 2, your wrist is too loose and wobbly. A floppy wrist makes the racket face unstable at contact, and even a tiny angle change sends the ball long. Number 3, your upper arm straightens completely, and you push upward from below. Then, the reason your backhand has no threat comes down to this. You haven't followed the correct sequence. Drop below the ball, brush forward with friction, then whip out to the side. If that path isn't right, nothing else matters. These steps are absolutely critical. Watch my demonstration here. When I skip the final sideways snap, the ball has no real quality. But as I practice that snap and make it faster, the ball gets heavier and heavier. Notice the racket path traces a curve, almost a circle. That circular arc is what lets you add genuine friction. Watch as I add speed now. The stroke stays exactly the same. I'm just accelerating through the same path. See the quality that produces. So check your own backhand against this sequence. First, is your forearm actually dropping low enough before contact? Second, are you driving forward into the ball before you sweep sideways? If you skip the forward drive and go straight to the side, you lose all your penetration. Third, after you drive forward, are you actually completing the outward snap? The forearm should pronate, turning outward through the finish. For the backswing, think of your belly button as center line. The racket starts just to the left of that center, roughly at your left knee. From there, the key alignment is: forearm sits below the elbow, wrist hangs below the forearm, and the racket head drops below the wrist. Everything cascades downward. At contact, you drive forward along an outward curving arc, push forward first, then sweep to the side with friction. Watch my partner sends one, and I do it slowly. Now a bit faster. See? I'm doing exactly the same motion, just accelerating through it. Let me use the forehand to make this idea clearer, because the movement is bigger and easier to see. Watch when I flick, see that half circle the racket traces. The wrist is leading that arc. Now I switch to forehand drive. The racket head still travels from the side up to the top, but now it's the forearm completing that half circle. Now let's switch to looping against backspin. Watch the arc I trace here. Why is that half circle wrong? Because there's no elbow drive forward. Of course, it's incorrect. For a forehand drive, the forearm creates the half circle. For a loop, if the forearm is still creating the half circle the same way, that's the problem. Any technique that involves friction, the half circle must be initiated by the fingers, not the forearm. You need your fingers to lead the racket head through that arc. Watch, this half circle is initiated by my fingers. The fingers lead the racket head through the arc first, and only then does the arm push forward. When you connect those two phases, that's how you generate real power. The forehand is the same principle. The early phase is friction, driven by the fingers. Once friction is established, then, and only then, does the arm accelerate. The key is right here. The racket head must trace a half circle, and within the friction system, the fingers complete that arc. Think of it like a short flick over the table, just the fingers, a tiny movement. Once friction catches the ball and the racket head has completed its arc, that's your spin loop. If I want a power loop instead, I catch the friction first, then drive forward through the ball.